So I've really hesitated in doing this video for reasons I'm gonna go into detail here. I want to talk about the Uvalde school shooting that happened yesterday. Um, the final count is 21 dead, um, 19 kids, 2 adults. You know, sometimes maybe I sin a little bit, of course, when it comes to issues, discussions like this. Um, but for some reason, last night when I got to my first stop and I was reading about the death count and I was reading about, all that. It was 19 at that point. It really hit me just how tragic this was. And for some reason, I was off work. I was reading about parents. They were putting up stuff talking about, have you seen my son? Have you seen my daughter? And they actually believed that their kids were missing or their kids had walked away, and they weren't. Their kids were dead. They hadn't been identified yet because of the grievous wounds to the bodies of the children. Being on the left with situations like this makes you realize the futility of politics, um, because you realize that nothing really changes. I've talked about it on here before that most of that stuff black people got back in the 70s, civil rights bills, that was because of the Cold War. They didn't do that to help blacks. They did that because we were in a state of war. So you brought in black people. You had to do some same thing with Roosevelt. He did stuff, veterans benefits. He did all kind of benefits for the people because we're at a war with fascism abroad. We had to do something here at home. It's not. They're not doing it to progress society. They're doing it because they're at war. Um, I've said before. Well, the murderer's name is I think Salvador Ramos. He was 18 or 19, I believe. He just turned 18, I think. I don't think they have a motive yet, as of at this point. I was listening to a senator that was talking about it, and he was talking about how people are dying, and what are we going to do about it? And nothing. You know, being on the left means realizing that nothing's going to change. Those kids that died yesterday died in vain. The kids that died in Newtown, Connecticut, they died in vain. The kids that died at Parkland, they died in vain. Things won't change. Nothing will change because the government's already bought and sold. Like the lobbyists are more important than any of that. So hearing people, change the narrative. It's the same thing with the Buffalo shooting. Seeing them change the narrative to disarm zones and these are victims. It's sad because you're really casting the blame and the auspices of the responsibility of it on the victims while telling people that Democrats were using it for politics. You're using it for politics. You're doing the same thing. But what you're doing is worse though, because what you're doing is actually using it to deny reality. Democrats are using it just to give more evidence to a point that's already been proven about white supremacy. that you talk about 1812 project and critical race theory, like this is critical race theory. Like while you're running around screaming about books and yelling for gay people to get back in the closet and how dare people have transgenders reading books to kids, like while you're doing this, they're out here killing people. There's blood in the streets, there's bodies in the streets, and you're looking for books to burn. I just those kids died in vain, and I think that's why maybe I don't really get into these type of topics, because I realize the futility of doing anything about it. Like being on the left is really, when it comes down to it, it's about learning how fucked up America really is and the fucked up things we've done all over the world assassinations, interfering in elections, and Pinochet and things like that. You learn about Operation Condor, where the U.S. was financing people to kill all the leftists in their countries, and you had countries working together across borders to catch people and murder them. And Henry Kissinger was involved. That's what being on the left is about: learning these things, but learning that you really can't do anything to stop where America's going, and it's about trying to keep America maybe in the present a little bit, and even that they'll call communism. It's like Truman said. Truman said that anything that Social Security, anything that works for the people, they're going to call socialism, and not much has changed over the years. I mean, that still rings true. That anything you do to help people and give them a helping hand and make their world a better place, it's going to be called socialism. This is what it is. Um, this this case is a tragic one because we just had the killing in Buffalo a couple weeks ago, I believe, a week or two ago, and now you got this, and I don't know. I said it before. When I saw Sandy Hook happen, when I saw the Sandy Hook massacre in Connecticut years ago, and I saw that no meaningful policy change had taken place. And the same thing in Florida. They tried to get a gun safety bill passed, and Democrats were doing it just to say at least we're doing something. Give us something. They couldn't even get that. They couldn't even give you that. Well, we ain't doing nothing. It's sad. It's really tragic to understand. And I knew after Newtown, after Sandy Hook, I said, if white people are willing to let their kids be murdered like this, the senseless manner, and there's no groundswell and there's no anger, then things will never change. And I was right. I knew that then. I knew that then. I'm not talking, the Pulse shooting, all that. I'm not talking about any of that. If white people willing to let their kids be killed like that, it's a senseless way, just be massacred. Um, I have no louder voice. If you wouldn't let your children be victimized, I have no louder voice than that. There's nothing I can say to change your mind, and that hasn't changed. This is a part of fascism. These people who are disconnected from reality and who uh, have nothing to lose, nothing to lose, and I hate that the right makes it to where these are lunatics. These are not lunatics. These are people who are driven by political ideology and they want to send a message. And just because they didn't vote for Trump and they didn't go in there with a Proud Boys shirt on or a Trump hat on, didn't mean they're fascist. There's a political spectrum. There's a political spectrum out there. There's people that are conservative on certain issues and liberal on others. And I mean, I go back to the synagogue, the Tree of Life synagogue shooting. That guy said that Trump didn't go far enough. And Republicans tried to say, well, then guess what? That means he's not a fascist. BS. Trump's rhetoric brought these monsters out of the woodwork. He brought them out the woodwork. And he made this type of ideology acceptable. That was the true danger with a Trump. Was I never realized before he got in office the amount of influence the president has on the public. Not just laws and bills, but just the influence, and that he's steering the ship. And when you steer a ship, it doesn't immediately turn like a car. It takes time for it to, but you're turning the wheel. It's going to start moving. It's going to start veering eventually, and that's what Trump did. He veered the ship in a very dangerous, very dangerous direction. And he I said this before, he made it where for some people who were on the right, who already were like fascists and stuff like that, he made it to where they felt like this is possible. Like your racist stuff is possible. And he talked about how he accepted the gay marriage stuff, but that he would put in people who would be against it. He put in judges that would work to undermine stuff. And now you see that. So his whole thing was to change the moral compass, to move the Overton window. And that's happened. And that has influenced violence. Like I said, all this violence, it's not straight on a spectrum, you know? Anyway, I think a president, right or left, has a duty and a responsibility to temper the passions of the governed and to be a leader of his party, but also be a compassionate, charismatic, uh, model for humanity. Um, Trump was none of this. He was neither of those. He was a fascist, and he was a person that was elected to hurt people, and he was elected because he was cruel, and people like cruelty. A lot of his base like cruelty. They get off on it. That's what they wanted. They didn't want a better country. They didn't want a better life. They didn't want any of that. They wanted cruelty and harm to their political enemies. Period. Thanks for listening.